Bruce, Mayor in 82 and 83, you're certainly knocking on doors and reintroducing the community to you as an active candidate. What have they been saying to you?
I'd say the most common thing is that people are appreciative that I helped steer the city away from the desal proposal. People are very concerned about water supply. They want it secure, but they don't want it too expensive or too energy consuming or contributing to global warming. And that I find in every neighborhood I've been to now is one of the most common things.
Right.
It's also true that the range of concerns of people in Santa Cruz is quite wide. And when I ask them more what's on their mind about the city, certainly poverty and homelessness, economic development that's appropriate for Santa Cruz is a real big concern. And the protecting the environment is a perpetual concern of Santa Cruz, and that's been showing up again in this election. It's been gratifying how many people have known my name. And, you know, still, it's been a long time since I've on the council before, but they appreciate that I've been working and have the experience to make a difference.
Bruce, you've done a lot of work with the university, and certainly you're close to the university. What would you do as a council member to strengthen that partnership?
Well, it has many levels, and the university is a huge institution, in some ways overweighing or outweighing the city as far as the size and its ability to do things. And so the nature of the partnership is probably the first thing that I want to maintain as collegial and as direct and communicative as possible, because when you have large institutions that overlap in territory, they have to be able to work together. And so to me, it's very important to maintain that. On the second level, the university contributes a lot to our community, and I'd like to see it much more involved in economic development. There are inventions in computer technology, genomics, the biological sciences, engineering, and of course the arts, which the university has always contributed to locally. And each of those things is actually a piece of what could be a diverse kind of medium to small business economy for Santa Cruz that we don't quite have yet right now. We have too many jobs in Santa Cruz are based on minimum wage and sectors that the growth has probably is beginning to reach its limits, whereas with small businesses based on some higher paying jobs in technology and some of those other areas, there's a lot more potential for the medium and small size businesses. So that's the second area. There's more cross-fertilization with the university and the town. And then the university certainly has impacts, traffic, growth, water use, and things like that. And this is where it's especially important, in my view, for the planning that both the city and the university do for the future, that those be worked together and in synchrony as much as possible. I have a lot of reservations about the plans for the expansion to the upper part of UCSC campus. I think a lot of that land ought to be preserved as natural preserve, and the water that might be available for it is a very tricky question. And I'd like the university to see its relationship with the city as more of a partnership in planning that, so that it really works well. Certainly it'll have a big impact on.
A lot of discussion has always been had about, you know, to be able to work local, to be able to live local, to buy local. And yet we really haven't, in my view, had the commitment to really develop any kind of affordable housing in Santa Cruz over the last few years. Bruce, give us your ideas about how we can actually be able to afford to live here, how the city council, you as a council member, can help create the kind of affordable housing that we really are so much in need of.
Well, I have a few ideas about that, Steve, thanks. The first thing is that I helped build affordable housing after the earthquake, built several hundred units because so much was lost in the earthquake. And at that time, there were a lot of funding sources, state, federal, private, and city. And the city had dedicated staff, a large number of staff devoted to developing affordable housing. And I'd like to see the city get back to that as a high priority. And secondly, I've been doing a lot of work on the San Lorenzo River over the years, and I regard that as, you know, it's kind of a back alley now in the center of town. It ought to be the centerpiece of town, and part of that would be to have that space be made available for development of more housing. We could have more height, more density near the river. It wouldn't harm the habitat value of the river, and it's really very much underutilized now. So there could be actually some new development that doesn't ruin neighborhoods, doesn't destroy views. It's right downtown in the center where the transportation and the jobs are and so on, and to me has tremendous potential. Additionally, of course, you know, in local government, we're subject to so much when it comes to housing that's really about the state and the federal economies and also governmental priorities. And if I were elected, I would make the time to pressure, along with people from other communities, our state government, which used to sell bonds to help finance local affordable housing projects. And the federal government needs to get back to what it has done historically, which is provide a great deal of funding that was cut drastically a few presidents back, as some of us have commented, President Reagan, cut federal housing subsidies to 1/10 of what they had been for several decades before that. That had an immediate drastic effect on homelessness and on the ability to develop and maintain affordable housing. And so we need to put pressure on the federal government. I don't mean to skirt the local responsibility by mentioning that, but it is a huge factor because housing is so expensive now.
Yes. Certainly. Thank you for your thoughts. Bruce, how are we going to reduce the congestion?
Well, the one thing about freeways is that if you widen them, they fill up again, and that's been shown all over California, all over the country. So I don't see that as a solution. I'm also a little concerned that it's maybe simplistic to say that if we could only work it out so that not as many people commuted over Highway 17 to the Silicon Valley, that the traffic would be less congested there, because if it's an easy, non-congested drive, more people will decide, okay, that works for them, and they'll fill it up again. So I'm not sure that's a little too simple of a way to look at that problem. I do agree with David, and I appreciate him saying this, that the rail corridor is not only important as a long-term investment in various kinds of transportation, pedestrian, cycling, and ultimately some sort of use of the rails. I don't want to get rid of them. I think it will take a while. Most transportation infrastructure actually is long-term investment before it really works. And so whether it's rail buses now and eventually light rail or other forms of trains, I think we should be thinking about that. But also that corridor, that's now in the public domain, and it ought to be used for the big pipes for the internet connections. Fiber optics or whatever is the best way to transmit large-scale internet connections. That's a perfect place to put it, and I'm glad to hear that David's been working on that, and I think it's a great way to improve the ability for people to not need to drive to be able to work, and that's what we need to be thinking about as much as possible. There, you know, we have a couple local industries that are heavily devoted to expanding the ability to telecommute. Cruz was another example of a local institution that's grown quite large, and they are pioneering the expansion of faster and faster broadband and wireless around the county. And so that's the other side of transportation, is not needing transportation, and so that's a really big thing.
I have accomplished.
Well, you know, I've been working for a long time on trying to have us transform the river from a neglected back alley into the centerpiece of town, and I'd like to see in 4 years some real concrete movement in 2 areas. One is a project or a set of projects that might involve housing or public art or recreation or something that actually gets on the ground in there. But secondly, and maybe more importantly, is a sense of optimism that we can get the river back, that it isn't just a problem area, and that's something I'm going to work really hard on.
Thank you.